Example 2, we want to graph y equals negative 3 times cosine x minus 3 pi over 2. And we're graphing over a 1-period interval. So let's see what we have. Do we have a vertical shift? Now be careful. To have a vertical shift, we're either adding or subtracting on the outside of the function. Here we have a negative 3. What's the operation between negative 3 and cosine? Well, it looks like multiplication. Well, vertical shift does not come from multiplying something times the function. It comes from adding or subtracting between cosine and the outside of the function. So we have no vertical shift. That tells us that the middle of our graph will still be at the x-axis, y equals 0. The amplitude comes from multiplying something times the front of the function. So since we have a negative 3 being multiplied, the amplitude then will be the absolute value of negative 3, which is positive 3. Do we have a phase shift? Well, a phase shift comes from adding or subtracting a value on the inside of our function. And we do have a phase shift. I have minus 3 pi over 2. So that's going to shift the graph in the opposite direction of the sign, so positive 3 pi over 2 units to the right. The period comes from multiplying a value times x on the inside of our function. Well, x is still just x, there's no coefficient, no number in front of it, so the period is still 2 pi. So where will our graph start and end? So we're going to take the input of the function, x minus 3 pi over 2, put it between 0 and 2 pi, and we will solve for x. So add 3 pi over 2 to all three parts. Now 2 pi needs to have a common denominator, so let's call that actually 4 pi over 2. So we're going to give it a common denominator of 2, so that's 4 pi over 2. So 4 pi over 2 plus 3 pi over 2 is 7 pi over 2. And now we have x in the middle, and 0 plus 3 pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2. So our graph will start at 3 pi over 2, end at 7 pi over 2, and we need to find our midpoints. So we're going to add together and multiply by 1/2. Three pi over 2 plus 7 pi over 2 is 10 pi over 2, and then we're going to multiply by 1/2. We can cancel common factors between 10 and 2. There's a common factor of 2. And multiplying across, we get 5 pi over 2. So there's our midpoint. Let's find our quarter point. So the midpoint between 3 pi over 2 and 5 pi over 2. We're going to add together. 3 pi plus 5 pi is 8 pi, keeping the same denominator of 2. And then we're going to multiply by 1/2. Once again, we can cancel common factors. This reduces to be 2 pi after canceling common factors. Let's find our last midpoint. 5 pi plus 7 pi is 12 pi, divided by 2, keeping the same denominator. Multiply by 1/2. And then after reducing common factors, we get 3 pi. Now we can graph our function. We've already taken care of the period, so we have a 2 pi interval from 3 pi over 2 to 7 pi over 2. We've already taken care of our phase shift. We've shifted to the right, and we're starting at 3 pi over 2. Now we need to put in our amplitude and use the vertical shift. Now, since the vertical shift is 0, since we're not shifting, then the middle of our graph is at the x-axis. So let's draw a quick picture of what the vertical flip is going to look like. So we know that cosine starts high, goes back to the x-axis, goes to the minimum, goes back to the x-axis, and then goes back to the maximum. Since we're doing a flip, then we're going to look exactly opposite of that. It's going to start at the min, go to the x-axis, go back to the max, to the x-axis, and then back to the min. So we're going to start here at 3 pi over 2 at the minimum, 2 pi, we're going back to the x-axis. At 5 pi over 2, we're at the maximum of 3. 3 pi, we're at the x-axis, and 7 pi over 2, we're back down to the minimum. We'll just draw our wave through those 5 points. And there's our cosine function with a vertical shift of 0, an amplitude of 3, a phase shift of 3 pi over 2, and a period of 2 pi.